Though I am always in haste, I am never in a hurry.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now somewhere in upstate New York. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Hot. It is hot.
Okay, we're going through a heat wave.
It's currently 96 degrees.
It's like mid-90s. It's not
hot.
Awful. We've had worse.
Look, my DNA comes from a genetically cloudy area that usually does not have to endure 90 plus degree weather. So I am hot.
Yeah, you have one of those mutant genes.
I'm one of those mutant genes.
You almost have like a photophobia thing happening.
I do have photophobia.
Yeah, you want to tell folks what that actually is?
A sensitivity to light.
Yeah,
I can't really go outside a lot of times. I mean, it's mild, but I mean, like I have sort of an intense pain in my eyes if I go out and walk around in the sun without like some sunglasses.
And yet you don't have the opposite ability that one would expect. Like you don't have
I don't have like dark vision.
Right, dark vision or the ability to see in very, very dark rooms.
Redheads
are
weird, man. They're the MCR1 gene, which is considered a mutation, and in fact, in the X-Men movie First Class, the first one with James McAvoy, he's even giving a lecture on like the MCR1 gene being like a mutation. Redheads are mutants. We have a lot of things that a lot of other people do not have. We have an incredible tolerance to surface pain, so we can take things like needles better than a lot of other people. We have we require more anesthetic, but less opioids than normal people. There's a whole list of things that make me different than most other people in the world. So yeah, it is hot.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry the conditions of today's environment is
it was especially
exposing
bad
you.
And especially sad because we spent part of this 95, 96 degree heat kind of saying goodbye to our comic book shop. Our local comic shop is closing down. And so we went over there and participated in their Everything Must Go sale, picked up some cool stuff. But it was sad because I was hot and we now have to go looking for a new comic shop. But Carr and the gang over at Earth 2 Comics over in
Sherman
Oaks have been amazing to us over the last several years. And so we want to thank all of them. And now we have to take some time and evaluate. But we have less than a month because then we're going to be behind in our comics. So,
right. Yeah, it's really sad. A lot of shops all over the country are closing its shutters.
It's just, it's so expensive, like the comics industry doesn't make it easy for these shops to stay open. And so we feel for everybody who's in this sort of position, but, we hope that at least the comics industry can continue in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Because that's why we're here.
That is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Well, Batman has been in the news, or Batman's Gotham City has been in the news. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say Batman. Couple of reasons. So folks know that Warner Brothers and DC are releasing a live action Penguin, this animated series called Caped Crusader. Is that right? And
That's the one that takes place in the 1930s,
right?
If I remember correctly, yeah.
And speaking of 30s, there was also an unauthorized, unapproved burlesque show.
Oh, yeah.
All about Gotham City. Now, I'm realizing they never say Batman at any part of the show, any part of its promotional material, its content videos. They always say like an unauthorized story of Gotham City. They never really mention Batman. This is in the Hollywood area, in the Montalban Theater, where we saw Empire Strikes Back, which is a parody Star Wars burlesque show.
Yeah.
So we thought, hey, I mean, this was designed for us. You have all of the villains, the rogues, the characters, costumes, an amazingly kind of like burlesque style parody show that is based on something that we really love. Now, Brian, and also we hadn't really prepared for what we were about to see. We knew there would be
Well, in what
there
way?
would be like dancing and.
But what do you mean we hadn't prepared? It's not like we have seen, like, as you mentioned, the Star Wars.
We saw that other
like,
show, but
we've seen burlesque.
At least for me, I didn't see any video footage or any YouTube or Instagram reels on this.
Yeah, it was hard to find
Right.
the usual sort of promotional spots and trailers that they've released didn't really include a whole lot of footage of the show itself. So we weren't 100% sure what we were going into.
And what was your impression?
I liked it. I was telling people afterward that if the Star Wars show, which is called The Empire Strikes Back, if that show were a 10 out of 10, because it is just an insane amount of fun and color and spectacle, and you just come out of there.
Like for that show, for the Star Wars parody burlesque show, we're all in on the joke. Like you just sort of feel it was kind of wild. It was unbridled.
Like you got a moment where like Luke Skywalker, played by a young woman, is washing the land speeder, and it just becomes this almost parody of Flashdance to some degree,
Sure.
because there's water flying everywhere, and then there's a moment with Jabba the Hutt. And you're like, how could they make Jabba the Hutt sexy? But they do.
did.
There's a moment with Palpatine that is incredible and unbelievable, and I'm not going to say anything about it because it's the kind of thing you just have to go see. But they nailed it. They figured out a way to make that just an unbelievable amount of fun. I will not say the same about Batet Follies 1939. It is not a fun show per se. It is mostly a variety review. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of song, which does not happen in the Star Wars show.
There's live singing,
Yeah.
and covers of songs. So as an example, at one point the Penguin comes out and sings CeeLo Green's Crazy.
Yeah.
And it kind of works.
It's
so moody. So
Yeah.
they didn't go like they didn't go campy and jokey and kind of like invite us to be a part of it. It was more like moody and serious.
And then the
sad.
dancers around them, like the Penguin, for example, the dancers around the Penguin, it was two sort of Iceberg Lounge dancers who were almost more background
But
than,
it was almost
than
like
the
what you would,
Penguin
if you would
himself.
imagine, yeah. And in a way, it was almost like what you would imagine if the Iceberg Lounge had a room like this with a stage. Now, you wouldn't imagine it would be the Penguin performing this,
right?
But at the same time,
But this was also sort of more his psyche. Like, you're not really supposed
totally.
to think this is Penguin in the Iceberg Lounge performing for the patrons.
That's true.
But he is definitely, it is music that is definitely supposed to be more his subconscious while the dancers are performing around him. And I would say the best bit of the night was similar in that it's a slow, moody version of was it Sound of Silence? The Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel, in being done by Mr. Freeze, and you've got Nora in a little tube right next to him as he's doing this deeply melancholic rendition of the song. And I would say that, you know, like the costume was really cool, but that's all we got out of that sequence. Like it's just him in a big costume doing a crooner-esque version of this song. And you're like, okay, well, that's cool. But it's not like watching, you know, Boba Fett take on Han Solo and Chewbacca in a dance battle where ultimately they strip down to their skivvies by the end. Mr. Freeze is not stripping down
by
to
the
any
way,
skivvies.
all the Star Wars fans, I'm using quotes for that, must hate that parody strip show so much because it's so, you know, like it's so out of canon. It's unauthorized as well.
What does that mean? No.
I mean, you know what the Star Wars the fans
the bros,
the folks that think that they're hardcore fans but are so critical of everything must hate the idea of a show like that. But getting back to Batman, I agree with you, and I also feel like in a way they stuck to the tone and the mood of kind of even Batman the Animated Series, right? Like
it is dark and moody.
It's, I think, no, there's no story being told throughout. It's not like by the end you had any kind of
But we didn't get that in the Empire Strikes Back either.
No,
like,
but
it's not story.
For something like this where there's so much singing and scene after scene, you'd think, how does this all fit together? And you're right, it's a variety show.
Yeah.
I kept looking around, especially during Mr. Freeze's number. I just kept thinking, this is so perfect for me. It's so moody and gothic and
you did say at the end, I feel like they did this for me.
Brian, it was so weird and so indulgent about all the different nuances of what Gotham City and especially who the villains are. And then I just looked around for a moment and realized, who in the heck is like me? Like who in the LA area
who is loving this as much as you are?
In this audience, in this theater, sitting in these seats right now, is getting this.
And you got all dressed up for it. Like you got into a pretty serious outfit to go out on the town. Yeah,
I was all in. And if you said that we'd go again, I would enthusiastically go. And I think again, it's because it is still entertaining, and I think that they really capture the essence and the tone of what might be a Gotham City a variety of performances. And you're right, nothing was. So when I look back, was anything happy? Was the only one Harley Quinn? I'll say the Harley Quinn song was definitely the happiest,
which she does with Harley Quinn was a really good one because of sort of the set design that they had created. It looked fun. It looked like the kind of thing you would see Harley on this sort of throne. There was a gigantic doll on the stage, very creepy looking gigantic doll. And then there was a creepy looking sort of toy monkey on the stage.
It was almost like a horror version of the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
Like,
and she
really
does. She goes out into the audience. She brings an audience member up, and then she woos him in sort of a threatening song.
Oh, he is. Is he shackled?
Yeah, he's shackled to the throne,
or manacled, I guess.
Yes.
To the throne. So it's that I'd say.
And we don't want to give away much
No.
more of that
No.
moment, but it is fun in that way. I would agree that is the one that got the laughter. Everything else is a bit moody. It does not have the same energy as the Star Wars one. That's not to say I didn't like this one. It was different.
It's different, but so different that I couldn't help wonder, again, how many fans are like me that would sit there and just thoroughly 100% enjoy the indulgence of this and get all of these different references and be entertained by it, right? And I think that because it is so unhappy, like most of it is very, very depressing, horrific, sad, actually. Like a couple of the numbers, there are some that are also very seductive and absolutely gorgeous, and you have some acrobatic and some rope artistic stuff and some actual burlesque stuff. So some of it is a little bit risque, but I don't think to the level of the Star Wars one.
Not in any way on the level of the Star Wars one. In the Star Wars one, that's what it was about. It was about fun. How can we make each one of these characters fun and sexy? And
and this I felt was Gotham City is miserable. Be miserable with us.
Choose miserable songs, sing miserable songs, dance to miserable songs, and moody stage lighting and
look
whatever.
really good while you do it.
And look really good while you do it. I mean, that's the thing is I can't complain about anyone who was involved.
Sure.
It's just they didn't showcase. You know who they did showcase? The woman. There was a female singer who was fantastic. She did 3 numbers, I think, just basically doing a almost like Jessica Rabbit-esque main stage, sort of performance, and it kind of culminates in a really beautiful number
felt
with
that
her.
She was our storyteller. She was our host. She was sort of keeping everything together. And I won't give anything away, but the entire time I thought, wait, is she symbolizing Batman? Is that what she's representing?
Yeah.
And in a way, and again, that's all I'll say about that. I was wrong. But I do agree with you. She was fantastic. All of the performers
They were great.
Talented.
There are no complaints about the performers. You even get to see Batman and Robin tap dance. And who doesn't want to see Batman and Robin tap dance?
I don't. Actually, that was the part that was the least entertaining.
Maybe they would have turned that into a battle of some kind. Like to me, that would have been fun to see the villains that we have just spent an evening with now get into almost a Batman 66 pow zop sort of dance battle, if not a violent fight, but a dance battle with tap dancing. Like that to me would have been really cool. It didn't quite turn out that way. I feel like we're almost looking at a rough draft of a show that might get bigger and better because it is the same company as The Empire Strips Back. So I feel like they are working their way through the early stages of a brand new show. Yeah. But it was fun. The Joker bit was fun.
Oh, that was hilarious. And again, not necessarily happy. The tone is disturbing.
He made it happy.
Right. Like
he made it.
But again,
fun,
the undertone.
But it's disturbing.
Yeah, the undertone is this is horrific. This is misery. This is destructive. So there's all Again, I look around the room and wonder, is anyone else like me who's just, really, really
giddy,
getting into this? And maybe there were. And maybe you're out there and listening to the show, write me a note and say, I get you. And
by the way, we should say that this is a show that's on tour. It's currently in Los Angeles. It will go on tour around the country. If Batette Follies 1939 comes to a city near you, in the near future, we recommend checking it out. It's worth the price of the ticket easily, I would say. I wasn't disappointed with what we paid for it. I don't want to come across as someone who is speaking negatively about the show. It's just if you've got a certain thing in mind, it's not necessarily
It's not
that thing, but it's still a really good show and definitely something that you're going to want to check out if you are a Batman or Gotham fan in general.
Well, we used all of our intro time to talk about a Batman burlesque show and not about the Penguin trailer and Cape Crusader animated series coming up. Let's hold off on those things too, because we have a little bit of time where we can discuss that and even maybe put some of those shows on our voting docket when it's time to vote for what we cover next.
And we should say that time is coming. We've only got 2 episodes of X-Men the Animated Series season 1 after this one. And so we are going to launch our polls within the next week or 2, I would say, to whittle it down to 2 or 3 really good contenders, which then if you go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and you join the $3 tier, you can be a part of the decision making on what we definitively cover next.
Yep.
And so keep an eye out on our social medias. We'll give you that information at the end of the show, but it's coming, folks. So don't let it take you by surprise. Pretty soon, we will either be covering X-Men season 2 maybe, or something entirely different. No one knows. Only you can help us decide. So again, head over to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and join that $3 tier so that you can get in on that decision making.
Hey, let me also give a shout out to our Discord fam. We also have in that community an opportunity not to do the final voting because that's reserved for Patreon, but our Discord is absolutely free. You can find the link on the Arkham Sessions Instagram page, and it's where you can participate in some fun discussion, just checking in, wellness ideas, mental health tips, things like that. I pop in there once in a while and drop some videos and content that doesn't make it.
You drop in more than once in a while. Like, we don't want to be like, oh, you're just never there. You drop in.
I'm lurking
but
in
you
there.
will. But you will you'll pepper in videos and things
sure.
that articles and stuff like that.
And for folks who don't necessarily have the money to contribute to a Patreon, but they want to be involved and perhaps vote at some level, the Discord has some opportunities for that. So we'll probably start with the Discord, put a bunch of things in there, have folks vote there, and then our final set will be on Patreon.
Yeah.
Also on Discord, some folks ask some questions here and there, and so I have one for you, Brian. Well, it's for the both of us. This is from Full Metal Knee, who asks us about how we were talking about Scott during the episode The Cure. So this was when we felt that he kind of flip-flopped or changed his perspective on how mutants should be treated. Specifically, I think you were a little upset that he switched his or changed his perspective.
I wasn't upset. I was pointing out that in one episode he was violently against even the notion of visiting Genosha, and was ready to throw down with Gambit over it. And then later, while they're at Muir Island, they are at a pub, and he then explains, later as they're watching TV or something, if I remember correctly, like the news, he then explains to the others in a very sad, well, some people just may not want to be mutants anymore. Like, he seems to get it suddenly. And then when they're in the pub on Muir Island, he then wants to throw down again, where he's like, we don't need your cure. And anybody who goes over there, if you want to come at me, you can come at me. Like, he's ready to go again. And so he waffles with his empathy at times, rather than empathize with the person who is struggling. He wants to force his own opinion about what it means to be a mutant and whether you should be happy with yourself down your throat. And in some cases, that's just not happening.
Sure. And in my interpretation, I just thought that was performative. Like, he just wanted to seem like a good leader in that moment. There was there were a lot of people around him, a lot of mutants around him, and I felt like maybe that was coming into play. But so Full Metal Knee on our Discord says that, full disclosure, they've always been annoyed by Scott, but here they say, I'm going to defend him quickly. If you substitute mutant with physically disabled person during that episode, the conversations turn to the exact same ones disabled people in the disabled community have been having since the civil rights movement. Some people would like cures to their disabilities, and some people do not think that they need to be cured to be healthy and valid in the eyes of themselves or others. And a lot of people hold both ideas at the same time. Quote, my disability is a part of who I am as a person, and I wouldn't want to lose who I am, but I'd really like to not deal with the hardship and the pain that comes with that anymore. And this is a common set of thoughts and discussion, to the point where you have so many people considering whether they are, quote, disabled enough to be part of the community. So Full Metal Knee says that's where I hear in Scott's talking about mutant cures, more of a back and forth wrestling with the idea and label and identity of being a mutant, not a performative appeasing of the people he leads.
Fair.
The X-Men finally get to see people who really can't mask or hide their mutant disability and who don't want to, since they have embraced the hardships as a normal variance in human experience. And I think we're continuing to see some of this come up. And by the way, thanks for the question or the comments, Full Metal Knee. And yes, I think that that's a really great way to contextualize Scott's, like, not even a shifting of perspective, but just a realization that he has that this is a variety, or these are different experiences and perspectives that people may have, and that their lived experience really does impact the way that they view their own identity. And who is he to determine for any other mutant, yes, this is so bad for you that you should get a cure, or no, we should all band together and be against this idea of a cure.
But then he does. That's the thing. Like, I agree with this comment wholeheartedly. It's absolutely possible to hold both of these beliefs within the same mind at the same time. But Scott is always trying to make sure his opinion weighs heavier than others. So when he gets in front of the crowd, when he comes between Angel and the other mutants who are saying, sign me up, it's like, you're going to have to come through me first in a way. Like, that's when it becomes a little problematic for me, is that he gets triggered pretty easily with this notion of,
well, and I wonder too if there's something about that where I know we're establishing that isn't necessarily his immutable thoughts, pun intended. Like, is he able to have some gray area there, and do we see him change his mind again? Because it's possible that in his experience, let me use some words that work for our disabled community, especially folks with hidden disabilities, that for someone like Scott, who might be able to mask, it's easy for him to say, like, we don't need to do anything. We don't need an intervention. We don't need a cure. We should be proud of who we are and how we are.
Yeah.
And he may not be experiencing the same kinds of discriminatory treatment, the actual, physical challenges, developmental, psychological challenges that the other individuals in the community are experiencing.
No one is arguing that Scott Summers is not a privileged white male in his 20s or early 30s, really good looking guy, strong personality, the strength of a leader. He is every bit the alpha that people imagine. And when you put that up against Leech, I mean, he's got no business preaching about whether Leech or any other Morlock would deserve or want a cure. So yeah, it's just, it was just that sort of, I think you put it best when you talked about performative, in that I feel like Scott says what he thinks needs to be said at any given time. So if it's just the X-Men watching the news, he might say, well, there's some people out there who wish they weren't mutants. But then when there's a guy trying to sell you, on some snake oil, he's like, we don't need your snake oil. And so I think Scott's personality changes depending on the situation. And that's why I think he's being more performative than actually introspective.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think too that, look, it's, the allegory really works when we think about the society that they live in. And I draw that back to what I'm saying about the community that lives with hidden disabilities, that it's not necessarily something in those identities, those experiences, their abilities that comprise deficits. It's that the social environment that they live in doesn't accept them, doesn't accommodate for them, isn't built for them, designed for them, led by them. So there's this sense of like, well, do we cure the folks in the community, or do we cure, i.e. dismantle and fix what's happening in society, which is one that's built by these privileged folks, these non-mutant allistic folks, let's say. So I think there's something to this, and this comes up a lot with autism and ADHD and other neurodevelopmental conditions, where many of us will simply say, this is how we are. Our brains just work differently. And then others will say, these are clear deficits and I need treatment. I need some kind of solution. I would take the pill. I would take the tests. I would take the interventions.
I would strap myself into a gigantic machine that shoots me with a laser and turns me into the slave of apocalypse.
Well, yeah, so much of this is wrought with the parallels, the risks, the threats of choosing the kind of life that you see in allistic people, and you would want that. And so that tension, I'm just glad this was brought up in the Discord, because I don't know that we really have talked about X-Men and autism, and yet I now see it there a lot. And this wrestling with, can we simply find harmony in the way that people are just different? Or is there just so much fear and avoidance of that difference that we built these systems that continue to give privilege to one group versus another? And we see that just all over in the different layers and levels of how we live our lives. Yeah. So I want to give Scott, going back to Scott, I want to give him more, give him a little flexibility. I want to be less harsh on him, but I have higher standards for him because, and this is just where I'm at with him. Maybe he has more power and privilege in him, and I expect more from him because of that. And he can be disappointing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Scott.
Come get your boy.
Okay, so we have to talk about this episode, which is the part 1 of Days of Future Past. This episode opens up. Oh my gosh, it's so cool.
We should say too that this Days of Future Past, for those who don't know, alongside the Dark Phoenix saga, is probably the most famous of the X-Men arcs and contemporary, X-Men. This Age of Apocalypse, And there were some that came after this, but when I'm thinking about like the Claremont era of the X-Men, much of which is what's being pulled from with the X-Men the animated series, you're talking about Dark Phoenix Saga, you're talking about Days of Future Past, and famous enough that, I mean, like even in the movies, there's been a Dark Phoenix Saga movie. Actually, there have been 2 of them, and then there's been a Days of Future Past adaptation as well. So it's a big deal that this animated series is taking on this particular story, which is that in the future, 2055, if I remember correctly, the majority of the X-Men are dead, having been part of a rebellion against the Sentinels and the government. And Wolverine is out there on his own, remembering the good times with his old buddies, trying to save mutants, not really doing the best job at it. He's gotten a bit older, comes in contact with a tracker mutant by the name of Bishop. This is someone who has been hired by the government to track down mutants and bring them in for money. He's a bounty hunter, essentially. And he has a very firm belief that because he is not going against the government, because he's not part of a rebellion, because he is one of the good ones,
I know. Yeah.
they'll treat him well.
Look, you cannot hold Bishop accountable for the choices for not supporting mutants at this time, because he would not survive. This is kind of about survivorship, and I do not blame him for his choices.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about these characters, the trackers, I think back to World War II era, Holocaust era, the neighbors who don't want to end up in the same shape that their friends and neighbors are. So they give up their Jewish brethren down the street. And they say, like, oh, I know that these people are housing these people, and I know that these people are Jewish, and I know these people are this. And then you think of like McCarthyism, America. I don't want to be blackballed from Hollywood, so I'm willing to name names, even if they have nothing to do with socialism and communism. And so you're right. It becomes a survivorship. It becomes, what do I need to do? What do I need to say to ensure that I keep living and keep living the lifestyle to which I have become accustomed?
Yeah. How this episode opens is really interesting. It's almost cinematic. You see the Statue of Liberty just all messed up and destroyed. It is dystopian. It's almost like a 90s sci-fi action film. You're
just expecting to see more barrels with
right?
fires.
Like, yes, it's just, it's really good. It's giving me like Terminator, Escape from New York. Like, it just has this nostalgic thing. But it's dark. Like, these mutants, we see a couple mutants who are, just trying to stay alive. They're being assaulted and persecuted, and it's wild. It's really terrible and tragic. Wolverine is old, and as we understand, he just has a longer lifespan. Yeah. And at some point, you actually see the tombstones of his peers.
Mm-hmm. And I think the earliest that one of them dies, if I'm not mistaken, the earliest that one of them dies is Jubilee, who then dies in 2010. Mm-hmm. So
she's like the youngest of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. So it does start off pretty grim. And then we realize that Wolverine actually has a buddy, Forge, and Forge has been building this time machine or portal. And the plan is to go back and basically fix this.
Yeah. Stop the event, the Splinter event that would have caused a dystopian future, which is an important assassination. We don't know who, and we don't know who the assassin is, but it's implied that they know who is responsible, and they need to go back in time to go basically kill that person so that they aren't responsible for this.
That better make sense later. Because
it's the whole like, would you go back and kill Hitler as a baby?
Well, sure. I know. So the plot makes sense, but who the assassin is and who gets assassinated for this to be the fallout, I need that to make better sense. So
that
hopefully
will make
that
better
will.
sense.
Okay. Yeah. So what's interesting is Wolverine was supposed to go back and, hit the 90s and prevent this big event from happening. What I didn't understand is that Wolverine's plan was to stay there. And I don't know how X-Men time travel rules work, but then there would be 2 Wolverines in that time.
Or would they? I mean, we don't know how time travel works here. It could go one of 2 ways. One, he simply stays there, coming from a timeline that now no longer exists, or he fades away because he will not become, he will not live to become that Wolverine.
He ceases to exist because he was in a timeline that then got wiped away.
There is a deleted scene from the movie Back to the Future 2.
Oh gosh. Okay.
That's a really dark deleted scene, but I think it would help you understand.
Does someone disappear?
Old Biff, who steals the almanac and the DeLorean, goes back in time to the 50s, gives it to young Biff. Then when Marty goes back and realizes that his timeline has changed and now Biff is this megalomaniac casino owner, and that various neighborhoods that he grew up in are now dystopian, and the bad parts of town, which I don't really like thinking about because of the way that the filmmakers presented them. Ultimately, the deleted scene is old Biff comes back to his time, but because young Biff is now more powerful and is, whatever, old Biff can't possibly still exist in that time period. He has now basically wiped himself out. So there is a moment when you see him come out of the DeLorean and he is hurting. He is like feeling something happening to him. And he then fades away the way Marty was in Back to the Future 1. When you see him, look down at his hand and it starts disappearing while he's trying to play the guitar at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance.
Okay.
So it would essentially probably be more like that, because all of the life experiences that got you to where old Logan currently is wouldn't have happened anymore. And therefore old Logan has to cease to exist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter because it's Bishop.
It's Bishop
who goes back in time.
All of this just to say, well, he's not even the guy who went.
No. Which makes sense because Bishop is the time traveler in my little brain of keeping track of X-Men. So that works for me.
And we should say that because we sort of skipped over this, Bishop used up his quota. Like he delivered 3 more mutants, including Wolverine. And the Sentinels are like, great, your quota has been met. We no longer need your assistance. We're going to kill you now too. So Bishop now is brought in with the rebellion and realizes that he was wrong all along and that he needs to become a part of this. And so, yes, he jumps into the portal that Forge has built and goes back to the 1990s and has forgotten, unlike, say, Terminator, which you brought up before. Kyle Reese knows his mission. He has memorized a speech. He knows everything that needs to happen. The only thing that doesn't come with him is anything non-organic. So Kyle Reese shows up naked. Bishop comes with new technology, comes with a big weapon that the other X-Men don't understand upon seeing it. And it becomes almost a bit of
Like it's an amnesia that he has.
Yes, but everything, he sort of knows he's there to stop something, but he can't remember who, which certainly gives us, the audience, this anticipation, this mystery. Who is it? Who betrayed whomever? Who assassinated whom? And then he is making it clear, especially after Cerebro is used and Xavier goes into his mind to see if he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I appreciated, and I.
Can you play that though?
I do have a little piece of audio here.
Professor X convincing himself.
No. Yeah, let's not spoil this for anybody. I'm just gonna play it, and then we're gonna talk about it here for a second. Here we go.
We've got this thing hooked up.
Are you ready for me to try to help you, Bishop?
Do I have a choice?
I'm getting a jumble of images.
The man doesn't have a choice.
He doesn't have a choice. He's locked
clear.
in, and Xavier's going to do it regardless. At least Xavier didn't come out and say, "But of course you do. Of course you have a choice. I would never do this without your participation and your willingness to have your brain probed by my psychic abilities." Instead, he just puts Cerebro's helmet on and is like, "All right, let's start this."
And he says nothing about what's about to happen. The problem I have with this is that he says, "Are you ready?" And the guy doesn't know, what am I ready for? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But he says, "Are you ready for me to help you?"
He doesn't need any.
But what is the? How is this helping the man?
Well, the amnesia. Like if he comes through, like if he looks into the deep recesses of Bishop's mind and is like, "Well, we need to know who the traitor is. I need to know if you're telling the truth." He finds out that he's telling the truth and believes him. He is unable to determine who the assassin is.
Right.
But he is at least able to then decide, we are going to help Bishop. So yeah.
And he sees all the terrible things that happen in the future, the tombstones, the dystopian future, the increased there's the what do they call it, a termination center for mutants.
Wolverine being basically executed by Sentinels just before Bishop left. You see that little moment happen.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but a part of me is like, well, you kind of have to that's the risk you took when you probed this man's mind.
Well, yeah, and if I mean, I think he was prepared to see all that.
Yeah.
You have to give him the benefit of the doubt, and you have to say it's possible this guy's telling the truth. He's got a bunch of technology we've never seen. It's highly advanced. Clearly, he came from somewhere. He's on a mission. We need to figure it out. I just don't think Xavier was necessarily prepared for the level of destruction that he sees the future ultimately culminating in. And the fact that the entire team is wiped out except for Wolverine.
Right.
And then we see Wolverine wiped out in his memory because Bishop turned and saw like that last little moment.
Well, can you talk about Nimrod?
Very little. I mean, Nimrod is a villain in X-Men. Like it's an advanced Sentinel. So it is a Sentinel from Bishop's time that has, unlike the other Sentinels, which if you cut its head off, if you blow it up from the inside or whatever, it's done. It then needs master mold to create more Sentinels, etc. Nimrod has the ability to bring itself back together.
Okay.
So think Terminator 2 in the end of that movie when they freeze him in liquid nitrogen and blow him up, and then when the heat from the factory sort of brings everything back to room temperature, all of that liquid mercury metal all comes back together. That's essentially what Nimrod's doing. No matter how much you destroy this Sentinel, it has the ability to repair itself and bring its pieces back together. And the only way that Bishop can protect the X-Men in that moment after they blow him up is to destroy the little transceiver that it's wearing that keeps it here. So this is a device on it that that anchors it to our time period.
Right.
Without it, it automatically goes back to its own time. Bishop has the same thing. He's got a wristband that if anything were to happen to this, he would be stuck here and not be able to go back. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not true. The opposite. If anything happens to this, he automatically goes back. And so yeah, that's essentially what they did with Nimrod.
So Nimrod managed to go through the portal right behind Bishop.
Yeah.
And seems to know to attack the X-Men.
Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of like the closest threat. But it seems like this other threat is this mission. I guess the threat of failing the mission, right? If you don't prevent this person from assassinating this other high profile figure, all this terrible stuff is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So you gotta take care of it. Got to nip it in the bud. And we should say that if you had any suspicions after the Genosha incident that Gambit might still be a traitor to the X-Men, those suspicions heat up significantly when Bishop suddenly sees Gambit walk through the door with Rogue and immediately is like, you're the one. You're the one I got to kill. And picks up his weapon and is ready to do it. And that's a
cliffhanger. That's actually where it ends.
That's where we leave it off. Is Gambit actually the traitor? Is Gambit actually the assassin? And if he is, who is he assassinating? Because Gambit is not aware of what he is destined to do in the future, and he doesn't know why.
It's a Minority Report situation where you've got to capture and charge the criminal before they've even committed
done
the
anything.
crime.
Yeah.
So it's a bit unfair. But yes, so far we've had some suspicion around Gambit for some time.
Well, he comes from an organization of thieves and scoundrels, and maybe shouldn't always be trusted.
Oh, let's talk about Beast for just a moment, because
we get a little Beast.
Gambit and Rogue go and visit Beast in jail.
They bring him some books.
They bring, apparently he has his little mini library, and it's because of his friends that he's able to keep reading.
And we see that he is even reading books that he has read many times before, like some of his personal favorites they are bringing to him.
He makes a reference to a poem. He says, "Stone walls do not a prison make." And he's, of course, referring to his prison. And the fact that his own, the fact that he's in prison doesn't mean he is in prison. Or just the fact that he is imprisoned doesn't mean that he is in a prison. So this man understands his own freedom.
Yeah.
Despite being behind these stone walls, right? But this is a line that actually comes from a poem, To Althea from Prison, from 1642 by Richard Lovelace. And I just wanted to read a little bit more of this section of the poem. The poem reads, "Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. Mine's innocent and quiet take, that for an hermitage. If I have freedom in my love, and in my soul am free, angels alone that soar above enjoy such liberty." And the background to this poem is that this man, Richard Lovelace, was in prison in England when there was a lot of religious persecution and things like that. And he apparently wrote this poem regarding his imprisonment. But yes, you're right. Beast will never really feel trapped by his mutant identity. Like he's truly, truly, authentically is one of the mutants that seems free of any self-oppression, self-hatred, self-persecution. He has the ability, he's protected himself from integrating or any identification with being less human than the non-mutants.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. There's not a lot of time with him. We get so little screen time with Beast. We haven't seen him in a couple of episodes. He continues to sit in prison, and he tells his friends, because his friends are like, hey, we can get in and out of, like, we watch Beast literally open up the iron bars. We know he can
It's
walk out of
weird
there.
because there is no door there. It's 3 stone walls and iron bars that go from the bottom, or I guess they're titanium bars, if you believe Remy. Just bars that go from floor to ceiling. There is no sliding door that we usually see with prisons. There is no opening, swinging door. He just bends the bars and lets Gambit out and then bends them back again. And I'm like, how are you even getting in and out of that room? Did they build that room
how do his
around
captors?
him?
How do his captors go? Like it is weird that there's no door. Maybe it's on the other side where we don't see.
I think it's just one of those animation design. They're like, well,
needs a
let's just
door?
assume there's a door here somewhere. But
Yeah. And I think at some point he says this is his way. This is his protest.
I do appreciate that they're willing to stick to their guns with this.
Wait to say more about that.
I mean, I appreciate that this is a storyline that has been with us since the first couple of episodes. I'm just ready for Beast to be out.
Same.
I'm ready for Beast to become a full member of the team again, because right now it does feel like a cheat. Like we don't need to animate the big blue Beast guy.
What?
Like
you think it's that?
I'm not saying I think it's that. I'm just saying that's how it feels to me.
Can they not afford his voice?
Oh no, that should be. I don't think that's an issue. I just think it's pencil time. I think it's it's easy to draw and animate humanoid people more than it is a guy who's.
I thought the cheat meant like character wise. He's so brilliant. Like when Bishop comes in with this gun, he can reverse engineer it and know exactly how to make one like that. But
you can do that with Forge. I mean, Forge.
But Forge is not in their timeline.
No, I know. Yeah, that's true.
So that's
This
what
is me. This
No,
is me
no, no,
getting
no.
97, getting confused with 97 again. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like when you said a cheat, I thought you meant, let's put our most intelligent character who can solve all these problems.
No, because
away.
technically in the minds of, I would assume, and I don't know how Eric feels about this, but I would assume that would be Xavier, right? Like Xavier's the one who would be the intelligent.
I disagree.
But I'm saying that I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that's the assumption that Xavier is going to be the mental equal to Beast in some way, and I just think I think Beast is a powerful mutant who, you're right, is like, I guess you're right. I mean, in that, I was literally thinking about this from the degree of like an animator, but if you think about this in the degree from the perspective of being a character, how do you have a story like Genosha? How do you have a story like Muir Island if you've got someone as eloquent as Beast,
Sure.
who can tell the Morlocks, not only Do you not have to live like
Oh,
this?
that
Look
he
at
would've
me.
he would've gotten
I
them
don't
out of
pass.
there.
And he would have, he just eloquently says whatever he needs to say, quoting whatever literature he has read and memorized. And suddenly the Morlocks are like, oh, I guess you're right. We'll come live up at the X Mansion. I kept
Yeah.
wanting to say Wayne Manor. But
So he sort of, I don't know if this, like they nerfed the team.
yeah, by taking him
removing such a powerful,
out of the team, they have, yes, it's a good way to put it. They have nerfed the team. But I also think that it comes down to a degree of animation and that,
I look forward to seeing what happens too, because while I love I actually do love how they're positioning him, and each time we see him, he's continuing to tell his story.
Yeah.
Again, these are his values. This is what's important to him. This is what works for him. This is his protest.
but he
And
hasn't, but his story hasn't changed.
Well, so this is what I'm hoping for is as we continue to see this, will there be a point, because we've seen the future. They have termination centers for mutants. So I wonder if there will be some point in this series, because we see something else in 97, but in this series, will we see that point where he begins to wonder,
am I first?
Well,
because I'm behind bars
sure,
already.
well, yes, but I meant more psychologically for him to wonder, I've done it this way. I've gotten their degrees, their education. I'm reading their books. I am as close to human, I'm close to non-mutant as I can be. I've done everything, and I still cannot be at the table with non-mutants. I've got to, I need to fight harder. I need to fight different.
Well, but yeah. But think about it this way. How many normies out there do you know who are as intelligent and well-spoken and have the abilities that let's just say Hank McCoy has? Now, we're not talking about Beast. We're not talking about the big blue furry. We're simply talking about Hank McCoy, Dr. Hank McCoy. How many people do you know have his degree of intelligence and the ability?
The folks who are non-mutants, you mean?
I'm talking about in the world, in the real world.
Not many.
Who has his level of IQ and EQ? He's like the perfect being, right?
Thank you. We're there. We did it.
But I think I think that separates him just as much.
So you're saying
the common folk.
You're saying they see him as a threat because of
he would
his
be
abilities.
the liberal elite. He's the intellectual who espouses all of this.
Sure. So too progressive. Yeah. I mean, I could see that.
Like he would be equally hated if he weren't a mutant because of his level of intelligence and empathy. And as we have discussed on previous episodes, it's hard, if not impossible, to have your EQ match your IQ.
Yes.
If you there becomes a point where that IQ starts to shut down your emotional, that level of EQ. You almost start to overthink things and go, but I am more intelligent than and shouldn't survival of the fittest, and shouldn't, it starts to diminish a little bit. But Beast is right. He's right there.
He really is a unicorn. And I've been grateful that he's in prison because he's protected from what we've seen going on.
He's still getting his yard time and his 3 squares a day.
It's
but I'm
complicated.
tired of his not being able to be a part of the team.
Yeah.
I feel like the symbolism has played its part.
Yeah.
And I'm eager for his character to develop and progress, as opposed to every single time we see him, him give us a speech about how he's doing the right thing by staying there. We've heard it. I did like Julia Leewald wrote this episode. I really liked what she did with this scene. And as you mentioned, bringing up the poem and talking about how this cage does not really mean that he is imprisoned emotionally or mentally and whatever.
Well, it reads to me as this cage does not mean I'm an animal.
No, you're right. I think that the original poem meant because I am in prison, it doesn't mean that I'm not free. I still have the freedom of will and the freedom of my religion and the freedom of, all these things. But you're right. When it comes to Beast and his mutant self, it's a double meaning. The cage is not a prison for him because he is free. And being a mutant is not a prison for him. He is free. So I think that is well touched upon by both Julia as the writer and by you as the viewer to pick up on that.
Yeah, I mean, if folks are familiar with the poem, some parts of the poem allude to...
Get weird.
Well, the poem alludes to a love interest.
Yeah.
And so
Althea. Let
me add that, you mentioned EQ and IQ. There's also social intelligence here. The team needs him. So something that I feel bad about is that Beast actually may be a bit of an introvert, but does have strong social support and is beneficial to the team when it comes to that kind of like social connection and bonding. And he's missing all of that social connection. And there's, folks understand the poem or understand what he's alluding to. It's also the freedom to love. Yeah. So I know we're going to come to this later, but Beast also understands he is no less a person by being in this prison and still has the capacity to love others and
you cannot. Yes, technically that is true, but now you're skipping ahead.
I'm just saying, for folks who know the deeper reference in the literature, he's also saying this is a romantic thing to say.
Yes,
that he seeks love, he's deserving of love, and that his conviction is that he can be loved, and that makes him free. That's a part of his liberation.
Yes.
Despite the reasons for being in that prison, in that cage. So I'm looking forward to seeing Beast again. I do not think we're going to see more of him until probably season 2.
You don't think so?
Maybe either the last
episode
here or season 2.
You think they'll because I have to admit, I don't remember this series as well as other people from when I watched it in the 90s, because I only watched it the one time. I didn't go back and watch it over and over and over again. So I do not remember when Beast rejoins the team permanently. But you think they would set up his imprisonment in episode 1 and then just not bring him back until after the finale?
Yes. Wow. I don't think we're going to see a lot of movement with him. I don't know. We'll see.
Ballsy. Okay. All right. But then in that case, I just have to applaud Eric and his team for being able to do a serialized TV show this well, where you're like, no, we're not setting up his release in the finale. We're going to keep it going because that's what happens in real life.
But it's comics.
Right?
It's comics.
Well, I don't remember... I don't remember an arc where Beast was in prison for
doubtful, but
over a year.
Doubtful, but what I mean by that is like I don't think there's a resolution here right now. They're going to probably continue the story into the next issue, and into the next season. But with that, we may or may not even cover the next season because we've got to figure out maybe around 8.
Oh my God, we have to cover the next season if they don't let Beast out. It just may not be
We might have
next.
to have like a special. But there's a lot of things that we could cover in DC, including the new Joker Harley Quinn movie, the Penguin series, this animated series coming out about Batman in Gotham City. I think there's something else coming out. There's just a lot of activity. So,
Are they still doing the GCPD show? Did that get canceled?
I think they were going to do an Arkham thing. Was that the Arkham one? Something with that.
It was going to be Arkham, but then it went to GCPD instead, and now
sure.
it may not exist. I know that Warner was canceling things left and right, even after they'd made them. Batgirl, I'm looking at you. But yeah, I've not. There was a time where I could have told you everything that was in production or pre-production or in development. And now it's gotten to a point where social media has driven me to the point where I just don't look at any of it anymore. Because I find not knowing is so much more, satisfying not watching the coming up next week or whatever. I just don't like. I'm like, ooh.
Or in some cases, being disappointed when something you were hoping for gets canceled or doesn't end up happening. So
yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. Trey, this has been good. This has been good. I'm looking forward to the second part of, again, one of, if not the most popular story in the X-Men franchise. The only other one would be Dark Phoenix. And I'm curious if there was an allusion by Jean in this episode when it's so funny. Bishop's like, well, I don't know who the assassin is. And then Scott's like, can't be Jean.
Oh, right.
Like, really? Right. Can it not be? And
well, then Jean herself was like...
And then Jean's like, it could be me. It could be me. And then she looks back at him and is like, we both know I've had my dark moments. And so I then find myself going, wait, did Dark Phoenix happen prior to the animated series? Like, are they not going to cover Dark Phoenix in the animated series? Because that seems like a missed opportunity. But she's like, we both know I've had my moments. And I'm just like, whoa, that's you just dropped a little nugget there that we need to unwrap a little bit more. And so I'm curious to see where that goes.
At one point in 2055, Bishop does say to Wolverine, do you think you can do it? Or it might be Forge. Someone tells Wolverine, you're going to go back and kill the person who
and then he says that means you have to kill. And he's like, I know what it means.
So I'm like, maybe he's supposed to kill himself from his earlier time.
I don't think that would be the case because I think that can't be the case.
Okay.
Like logically speaking on a timeline, like that can't be the case because that would mean Bishop is saying you're going to have to go back and kill yourself. No, it can't possibly be because then why would Wolverine be a hero in the rebellion when he's the one who assassinated whoever?
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah, like he wouldn't.
So then the only other person I can think of is Professor X
or Jean.
Or Jean.
Like if everyone knows that Wolverine had a thing for Jean, and then Bishop's like, that means you're gonna have to kill, and he's like, I know what it means. But if it's true that Gambit is the traitor, is the assassin, we got to figure out why.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll all be answered in the next episode. Drea, till then, why don't you tell the good folks at home where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Threads at Dr. Drea Psychology and my website, drdreapsychology.com.
You can find me. I am mostly at Instagram at B_Ward028. You can find us both over at Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. Again, follow us on Discord and come to our Patreon, patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, where you can get your name called out in episodes just like this by joining the $5 tier. Folks who have made this episode possible are Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, my father, Carl Ward, Aaron Wenrick, Mike Ficklin, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Kevin Ortel, Trevor Schwartz, Mark Pepper, Frank Muller, Swaras Ali, and then two folks that we really need to discuss here. We've talked about them a little bit in the previous weeks, but it is happening. Todd Stashwick and David Nett of Hero's Journey Fitness, they are officially launching that Kickstarter that you and I have been talking about, progcorefantasy.com. Go check them out. When this episode drops, you're looking at the Kickstarter dropping within 24 hours. So go learn more about that Kickstarter because there is a lot of fun to be had, and I cannot wait to be involved. Also be sure to join our family over at Fanbase Press. They have also just announced a Kickstarter coming up in the next little bit. So be sure to go over to fanbasepress.com or follow them on social media and check out what they've got going on. Lots of great podcasts, lots of great news stories, and lots of great comics on their own. You're going to love them. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Party's over. Someone invited Nimrod.